The mayor is making an announcement about electric vehicle charging stations.
And we're also happy to have with us other representatives from the city government and from Hydro, because this has very much been a team effort to get this step forward in place today so that we could move forward. And today, I think a lot of people have to understand when they see these kinds of announcements in this particular physical place, 8 new charging stations in one Green P parking facility doesn't sound like much, but it's part of a much broader program, a much more ambitious program than we've ever undertaken before. And it is a part of an overall effort that's going to lead to having the infrastructure in place to make sure that we can welcome and accommodate electric vehicles going forward. And so I want to begin by thanking the Toronto Parking Authority for their leadership in providing this much needed infrastructure in this particular facility and in what they're doing both on and off the street. Of course, on-street parking, again, there's a challenge there, and it's more challenging to put EV charging stations there. And the City Council has authorized a faster moving forward with those initiatives, but off-street, including in particular in Green P lots, which we have the good fortune to own through the Parking Authority. It is a place where we can move forward, as I will outline today and as Scott will as well. This has involved quite a lot of work. Again, I think most people understand that just to sort of say you're putting in a charging station isn't as simple as that. You wish it was. But we've had great cooperation from Toronto Hydro with all their work on electrification, together with the Transportation Services Department, the Environment and Climate Division, the Toronto Atmospheric Fund, and many other partners TPA is working with to bring the charging program to life. These are things that are simple to talk about, but not as simple to implement, but we're moving forward, and today is evidence of that. The charging stations here in this Green P lot on Wellesley Street mark the start of a multi-year program that will see many more charging stations constructed across TPA's Green P off-street parking facilities. And it is something that multi-year doesn't mean all that far away, because as I'll mention, a lot of this work is going to be done even this year as we finish the year and into next year and the year after. The TPA are going to use its knowledge and its data, because they have a lot of information they've collected from the use of the Green P app and otherwise, to decide where best these EV charging stations should go in the initial instance, so that we can make sure they're located where people are most likely to use them. The initial focus will be in the downtown, but the objective is to make sure that we stretch that infrastructure across the city as appropriate. Starting in 2023, Toronto Parking Authority will take over the responsibility for installing and operating all City of Toronto on-street public EV charging stations. Their ambitious plan includes the provision of more than 100 EV charging stations at 11 Green P parking locations by the end of this year, growing to over 650 charging stations off-street and on-street by the end of 2024. And this is another example of the progress that we are making step by step to move our city forward and achieve solutions to reach net zero emissions by 2040, which is the city's stated goal. We're in line with our partners in the federal and provincial governments who are investing in electric vehicles and the critical minerals needed to build them, and batteries for that matter. There have been initiatives undertaken in that regard, and we are working hard to meet the federal government's goal of reaching 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035. It's ambitious, but we're working to make sure that the infrastructure is in place and other things we can do as a city to try and achieve that goal. We are working hard as a city government to try and tackle climate change at the local level, and we have a lot more to do. But by working together with local partners, and I've mentioned them at the outset, including the Toronto Parking Authority, we know that we'll get there, because we know we have to. More than a quarter of the air pollution in Toronto comes from personal vehicles, which is what makes today so exciting. And so that we know, as we build transit, as we acquire electric transit vehicles, and as we do things to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles, not just by the city government, but also by people in the private sector and in their own individual cars, this is all going to help. Electric vehicles are one of the key strategies identified in the city's Transform TO climate change action strategy to meet the net zero targets. And beyond support for the private EVs, we are investing heavily in electric buses, and will be converting the city's own fleet as well. We're increasing charging availability, addressing cost and convenience barriers, increasing public awareness and education, and creating economic opportunities that will benefit the local economy. So this is, again, none of these things by themselves are going to address in full achieving all of our ambitious climate change targets, but they all add up to doing things that are going to help us to have people not only understand that we're moving to achieve our targets, but actually see it and feel it and experience it, so that if they have an electric vehicle, they will have in the green Green facilities and on-street over time places to charge those. And of course, we're also witnessing private sector initiatives to have more EV charging. All of this is not going to be done by government. And when you look at charging stations in place elsewhere, a lot of them are put in place by, I'll call it the broader private sector, including whether it's service stations or other places like that where they're located as a private initiative. But what we're doing here is making sure that we move forward under the leadership of the Toronto Parking Authority with significant public and publicly available charging infrastructure. And this is a service that Torontonians want and need, and it's consistent with our taking action on climate change as we're committed to doing through the Transform TO program. So we're headed in the right direction. All of these things are meant to show people, both with their own eyes and ears, but also through the experience they'll have in using these off-street facilities in Green parking lots, that we are actually moving ahead and taking steps, as will the further purchase of electric buses and the conversion of our own fleet do that when it comes to vehicles and what we can do to help in that regard. So I thank the Parking Authority, Hydro, all the city departments very much for their diligence and leadership in getting us to today, but today's a beginning more so than an end, and I'm looking forward to seeing great progress made on time, on schedule, over the next period of time, because that's simply what we have to do. Thanks very much.
We've been listening to the mayor making an announcement about electric vehicle charging stations.